Okay, so for this recording, I'm not going to I'm going to read the story with you, but at this point, you should be comfortable enough with annotating to do it on your own. I will go ahead and point out to you that for what we're focusing on with perspective, characterization is going to be your main focus because you are trying to understand the way the character thinks and the way the character views the world. So you would really need to pay attention to your characterization aspect. I've included our other important things that we've learned to annotate for because we have to continue to grow as readers, and it's good practice. As I read, I'll probably point out a couple of important things, but like I said, I'm not going to annotate with you this time. All right. Awesome in a Day by Ray Bradbury. Ready? Ready? Now? Soon? Does scientists really know what will happen today? Look, see for yourself. The children pressed to each other like so many roses, so many weeds intermixed, peering out to look at the hidden sun. It rained. It had been raining for 7 years, thousands upon thousands of days compounded and filled from one end to the other with rain, with the drum and gush of water, with the sweet crystal fall of showers, and the concussion of storms so heavy they were tidal waves come over the islands. 1,000 forests had been crushed under the rain and grown up 1,000 times to be crushed again. And this was the way of life forever on the planet Venus. And this was the schoolroom of children of the rocket men and women who had come to the reigning world to set up civilization and live out their lives. So for this particular story, this tells you a little bit about the setting, which would be really important when you're looking at your characters later. So just kind of know that it rains every day, all day, never stopping on Venus. So just kind of remember that. It's stopping, it's stopping. Yes, yes. Margot stood apart from them, from these children who could ever remember a time where there wasn't rain and rain and rain. They were all 9 years old, and if there ever had been a day 7 years ago when the sun came out for an hour and showed its face to the stunned world, they could not recall. Sometimes at night she heard them stir in remembrance, and she knew they were dreaming and remembering the gold or a yellow crayon or a coin large enough to buy the world with. And she knew that they thought they remembered a warmness like the blushing in the face, in the body, in the arms, and the legs, and the trembling hands. But then they would always awake to the tatting drum, the endless shaking down of clear bead necklaces upon the roof, the walk, the gardens, the forest. Their dreams were gone. All day yesterday they had read in class about the sun, how like a lemon it was, how hot, and how they had written small stories or essays or poems about it. I think the sun is a flower that blooms for just 1 hour. That was Margot's poem, read in a quiet voice in the still classroom while the rain was falling outside. "Oh, you didn't write that," protested one of the boys. "I did," said Margot. "I did." "William," said the teacher. But that was yesterday, and now the rain was slackening, and the children were crushed by the great thick windows. "Where's teacher? She'll be back." "She better hurry, we'll miss it." So these kids have never actually seen the sun that they can remember. Last time the sun came out, they were 2. But the author is putting a special focus on Margot, so you're getting ready to find out that there's something about Margot that makes her different from the other students. They turned on themselves like a feverish wheel, all tumbling spokes. Margot stood alone. She was a very frail girl who looked as if she had been lost in the rain for years, and the rain had washed out the blue from her eyes and the red from her mouth and the yellow from her hair. She was an old photograph, dusted from an album, whitened away, and if she spoke, her voice would be a ghost. Now she stood separate, staring at the rain and the loud, wet world beyond the huge glass. "What are you looking at?" said William. "Nothing," said Margot. "Speak when you're spoken to." He gave her a shove, but she did not move. Rather, she let herself be moved only by him and nothing else. They edged away from her. They would not look at her. She felt them go away, and this was because she would play no games with them in the echoing tunnels of the underground city. If they tagged her and ran, she stood blinking after them and did not follow. And when the class sang songs about happiness and life and games, her lips barely moved. Only when they sang about the sun and summer did her lips move as she watched the drenched windows. And then, of course, the biggest crime of all was that she had come here only 5 years ago from Earth, and she remembered the sun, and the way the sun was, and the sky was, and when she was 4 in Ohio. And they had been on Venus all their lives, and they had been only 2 years old the last time the sun came out, and had long time since forgotten the color and the heat of it and the way it really was. So now you can see what makes Margot special, as well as what kind of relationship she has with her classmates. So make sure you're kind of paying attention to that dynamic. But Margot remembered. "It's like a penny," she said once, eyes closed. "No, it's not," the children cried. "It's like a fire," she said, "in the stove." "You're lying, you don't remember," cried the children. But she remembered, and stood quietly apart from them all and watched the patterned windows, and once a month she refused to shower in the school shower rooms. That had clutched her hands to her ears over her head, screaming, and once a month ago, screaming the water mustn't touch her head. So after that, dimly she sensed that she was different, and they knew her difference and kept away. There was talk that her father and mother were taking her back to Earth next year, and it seemed vital to her that they did do so, though it would mean the loss of thousands of dollars to her family. And so the children hated her for all these reasons of big and little consequences. They hated her pale snow face, her waiting silence, her thinness, and her possible future. "Get away!" The boy gave her another push. "What are you waiting for?" Then, for the first time, she turned and looked at him. And what she was waiting for was in her eyes. "Well, don't wait around here," cried the boy savagely. "You won't see nothing." Her lips moved. "Nothing," he cried. "It was all a joke, wasn't it?" He turned to the other children. "Nothing's happening today, is it?" They all blinked at him, and then, understanding, laughed and shook their heads. "Nothing." "Oh, but," Margot whispered, her eyes helpless, "but this is the day the scientists predict. They said they know the sun." "All a joke," said the boy, and seized her roughly. "Hey, everyone, let's put her in the closet before the teacher comes." "No," said Margaret, falling back. They surged about her and caught her up and bore her and protested and then pleaded and then cried. Back into the tunnel, a room, a closet, where they slammed and locked the door. They stood looking at the door and saw it tremble from her beating and throwing herself at it. They heard her muffled cries. Then, smiling, they turned and went out and back down the tunnel, just as the teacher arrived. "Ready, children?" She glanced at her watch. "Yes," said everyone. "Are we all here?" "Yes." The rain slackened still more. They crowded to the huge door. The rain stopped. It was as if in the midst of a film concerning an avalanche, a tornado, a hurricane, a volcanic eruption, something had first gone wrong with the sound apparatus, thus muffling and finally cutting off all the noise, all of the blasts and repercussions and thunders, and then second, ripped the film from the projector and inserted in its place the beautiful tropic slide, which did not move or tremor. The world ground to a standstill. Gracious. The silence was so immense and unbelievable that you felt your ears had been stuffed, or you had lost your hearing altogether. The children put their hands to their ears. They stood apart. The door slid back. The smell of silent waiting. The world came into them. The sun came out. It was the color of a flaming bronze. It was very large, and the sky around it was a blazing blue tile color. And the jungle burned with sunlight as the children, released from their spell, rushed out, yelling into the springtime. "Now don't go too far," called the teacher after them. "We've only got 2 hours, you know. You won't want to get caught out." But they were running and turning, and faces up to the sky, feeling the sun on their cheeks like a warm iron. They were taking off their jackets and letting the sun burn their arms. "Oh, it's better than the sun lamps." "It is. Much, much better." They stopped running and stood in the great jungle that covered Venus, that grew, never stopped growing tumultuously, even as you watched it. It was a nest of octopi, clustering up great arms of flesh like weed, wavering, flowering in the brief spring. It was the color of rubber and ash, this jungle, from many years without sun. It was the color of stones and white cheeses and ink. It was the color of the moon. The children lay out, laughing, on the jungle mattress and heard it sigh and squeak under them, resilient and alive. They ran among the trees, they slipped and fell, they pushed each other, they played hide and seek and tag. But most of all, they squinted at the sun until the tears ran down their faces, and they put their hands up into that yellowness and that amazing blueness, and they breathed of the fresh air, and listened to the silence which suspended them in the blessed sea of no sound and no motion. They looked at everything and savored everything. Then, wildly like animals escaped from the caves, they ran in shouting circles, and they ran for an hour and did not stop running. And then, in the midst of the running, one of the girls wailed. Everyone stopped. The girl, standing in the open, held out her hand. "Oh, look," she said, trembling. They came slowly to look at her open palm. In the center of it cupped a huge and single raindrop. She began to cry, looking at it, and then they glanced quietly at the sun. Oh, a couple of cold drops fell on their noses, their cheeks, and their mouths, and the sun faded behind a stir of mist, and the wind blew cold around them. They turned and started to walk back towards the underground house, their hands at their sides, their smile vanishing away. A boom of thunder startled them, and like leaves before a new hurricane, they tumbled upon each other and ran. Lightning struck 10 miles away, 5 miles away, a mile away, a half a mile. The sky darkened into midnight in a flash. They stood in the doorway of the underground for a moment until it was raining hard. Then they closed the door and heard the gigantic sound of rain falling in tons and avalanches everywhere and forever. It will be 7 more years. Yes, 7. Then one of them gave a little cry. Margot! What? She's still in the closet where we locked her. Margot. They stood as if someone had driven them, like so many stakes, into the floor. They looked at each other and then looked away. They glanced out at the world, at the raining now, and raining steadily, and they could not meet each other's glances. Their faces were solemn and pale. They looked at their hands and feet, and their faces down. Margot. One of the girls said, "Well," no one moved. "Go on," whispered the girl. They walked slowly down the hall in the sound of cold rain. They turned to the doorway to the room in the sound of the storm and the thunder, lightning on their faces, blue and terrible. They walked over to the closet door slowly and stood by it. Behind the closet door was only silence. They unlocked the door even more slowly and let Margot out.